If you're newer to print on demand or you're just not getting the sales that you want with print on demand, then you are going to love this interview with Shawna. Shawna started print on demand and didn't really make any significant money for her first 7 or 8 months selling print on demand in Etsy. But since then, she has actually been able to sell over $295,000 worth of t-shirts on Etsy and has now quit her full-time teaching job and gets to do print on demand full time. So you're going to love this interview. Make sure you grab a notebook and a pen and take some notes because Shawna's interview is amazing and you're absolutely going to love her story. But if you're new here, my name is Cassie Johnson and I am a full-time Etsy and print-on-demand seller as well. And I started this channel here to teach other people how they're going to be able to quit their full-time jobs and sell Etsy and print-on-demand as well. So I've got lots of videos on my channel that you can go watch if you're not sure what print-on-demand is or if you're wondering how to get started. I'll link a few videos down in the description below, and go ahead and like this video and subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. And let's jump into the interview with Shawna. So help me welcome Shawna. Shawna, how are you?
Hi, Cassie. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. We're so excited to learn from you. Like I said, you've had quite the roller coaster of a start here with Etsy. So we'd love to just hear a little bit more about your story because I think it is just so relatable to anyone who starts out and doesn't really get a sale super fast. So why don't you tell me why you even started Etsy and print on demand? What kind of brought you here?
Well, it was COVID times, and I was home from school. I'm a school teacher. And I did not want to go back to school and tutoring. I was tutoring every day after school, and I loved my students and I loved my tutor kids, but it was just a lot of time spent, and I, wasn't getting home from school until like 6:30, 7 o'clock. So during that time, I started renovating my house, and I thought, well, maybe I can sell, farmhouse mirrors on Etsy because I was making myself a farmhouse mirror, and they were going for like $400 or $500. So I started looking into that, which would have been a lot of work because every time someone ordered a mirror, I would have been, with the miter saw and painting it and all that and trying to ship it, and came across, this information about doing shirts online that I didn't actually have to print myself, and I could just design them and someone else would print them and ship them. And so that's what got me looking into it, so that I would be able to replace that tutor income that I had.
Yeah, that's great. I think most people probably have a similar story. They're like, well, I liked Etsy in general, but then I found this and I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be way better. So I know that was definitely my story too. So I totally get that. So you started on Etsy when? It was almost 2 years ago now?
Yep, it was October of 2020.
Okay, awesome. And then I know you said it took you a little while to get your first sale. So why don't you run me through that first month? Did you do a ton of listings? How long did it take to get your first sale?
I probably had about 60 listings up when I got the first sale, and it took about 3 weeks. We had just gone back to school. We'd gone back in October, and there were, a lot of cute phrases that I wanted to wear myself as a teacher about, hugging you and just like sweet things about messages toward, to the kids, because we're all wearing masks and we're all covered up and all that and not supposed to give each other high fives and all that. So I'd made a couple of versions of these shirts that I wanted to wear myself. And I had not told anybody that I was on Etsy because I didn't want anyone to go, oh, that's weird. Or, are you sure you should be putting all your time into making shirts online? That sounds strange. I don't know if that's going to work. So I just kept it to myself and I just kept plugging along. And on my way back from lunch one day, I get a little chirp, a little noise in my phone. I hadn't made a sale, but someone was reaching out to me, a principal of a school, and she was asking me questions about the shirts, and she wanted to buy 30 shirts for all of her teachers. So I was beside myself. I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening now. I'm going to be rich. This is incredible. And was messaging back and forth with her. And I did wind up making that sale that month. I was super nervous the shirts wouldn't get delivered or something would happen. And the shirts were delivered. Everything was fine. The teachers loved the shirts. So that was super exciting. And I kept hearing, on YouTube stations that I was listening to, that your first sale is the hardest sale. So I was like, okay, well, now I've made my first sale. It's going to be smooth sailing now, right? Like I'm going to get a sale every other day. And that I felt the second sale was actually my hardest sale because it took almost 4 weeks for my second sale to happen. Finally, someone came in and bought another shirt. And then from there, it was, every couple of days, someone came in and bought a shirt. Super exciting for sale.
Yeah, super exciting. That's a huge first sale. And I think that's a good call out to the power of getting into group shirts, because if you get into those group shirts right in the beginning, I know it can be scary to make listings for group shirts or couples matching shirts or different things, but how much more fun was that to have someone buy multiple shirts instead of just one? Because that could have been a very different beginning to your story. Well, and let's look at what time that is, because I think it's really interesting that it's almost 2 years later to the day that you started. So if anyone's watching is just getting started with their Etsy journey, I think this is really inspiring, because this is exactly what your journey could look like. And if it's feeling slow in the beginning, that is totally normal and you're not alone. And I think that can be so comforting to hear, right? But when you're looking at the time frame, right, in your first 2 months almost, you had like 2 sales, or did you say you got like 4 sales your second month?
Yeah, my in my second month, I got 4 sales. They were all one shirt sales, and they were all toward the very end of the month. So I assume they were gifts for Christmas. People were buying gifts. But yeah, it was like very end of November that finally, I think one day I had 2 sales, and one day I was super excited, and then like 3 more days, another sale, and a couple more days, and another sale.
Yeah, 'cause
So
I think in the end of November, everyone will probably get sales, right? There's so much traffic, so many people coming to Etsy. But what were you selling at that time? Because I think you had said you didn't really get into Christmas your first year.
yeah, I felt like I if I could do that over again, I would make a very different decision. So I felt like because I was coming in October, it was too late for me to get in on Q4. Like I should have been listing that stuff prior. So I just focused on other niches, and really, maybe I put like 20 Christmas shirts up, which isn't a very big stab at that at all. And I did not get in on that Christmas rush or those Christmas, I really kind of just skipped it. So the things that I was selling, I assume they were, selling as gifts, but I wound up selling 4 things in November and maybe 7 things in December.
Yeah, so
So
definitely a lot slower start than you were probably hoping. So going back, you probably would have listed more Christmas stuff and had known that it wasn't too late. So if anyone's watching this thinking it's too late for Christmas, just know that it's not, because Shawna has a crazy story to talk about her next holiday season in 2021 and what she did there. So make sure to stay tuned until later for that. And so it really took you a while to really start making sales, right? We know the end of the story. We know you sold $295,000 on Etsy and you were able to quit your job. But at this point, you're 2, 3 months in and you've made like 40 sales, right? It doesn't sound like it would lead there. So how did that feel for you, not getting sales so fast? Were you pretty discouraged? Did you think about quitting? Like what kept you going after months of doing all this work and not getting the results you wanted?
So it like really in the first 2 months, I probably had under 20. It was probably toward the end of the fourth month that I had closer to 50 orders because January picked up a little bit. I had 26 orders. During that time, the thing that kept me going was watching the YouTube stations that I was finding a lot of inspiration from. And then your interviews with life hackers came out, and I was watching a lot. I watched your interview over and over again because I just found that story so inspiring. And then you had done a follow-up interview, a few months later, and I'd watched that one over and over again. I had set my mind to it that when I'd open the store, that I would keep it open for 1 year at least, that I was not allowed to give up before the 1 year mark, and or 1,000 listings. So that's what I had in my head. I had divided up that amount of listings. What did I need to get, what did I need to get in it each month in order to make that happen? And I just was not going to give up prior to that. And, good thing I didn't, because it took me like 7, 8 months to start getting side income from the shop, but it took that long to get it moving. So I just kept watching those YouTube stations that were giving me that you can do this. Just keep doing this over and over again. One of the things that was stated was when you're not making sales, list. And I must have repeated that to myself over and over again. Day after day, not making sales. I would just say to myself, I'd come home from school, I would get on the computer, I would start listing, and I would just say to myself, list. The only way you're going to start making money is if you list.
I love that. If anybody is not making sales right now, get a post-it note and write
Mhm.
down, Shawna says, if you're not making sales, list, because that is honestly the best advice. So it takes a while to really learn what sells on t-shirts, what types of designs, when to post them. There's a lot to learn. It's not like when you start a new job and you get to go through a 6-week orientation that teaches you everything that you need to know, right? You have to kind of figure a lot of it out yourself and do a lot of trial and error. And so it wasn't until really the spring of 2021 that your sales really started taking off. So why don't you tell us about your first like pretty successful months? And do you feel like you did anything different for those months, or how many listings did you have at that time?
Looking back, I don't know exactly how many listings I had. I would have probably had around 700 or 800 listings coming into like summer break. I think of everything of, in terms of school calendar. So let's say April, May, June, I was making my first $1,000 profit month wouldn't have been until like June. And I took a big hit that month because, I didn't know anything about trademarks, and I was doing Jeep stuff because I had gotten a Jeep Wrangler and I was all into Jeep girl stuff. So I was making shirts that said Jeep girl. And that was the niche that I was plugging along the best in. So when I became aware, Jeep came in and they got me, and I took all my Jeep stuff down immediately, but I lost hundreds of listings, and that's where the most of my sales were coming from. So it was so, like, my heart was just like, oh my gosh, I just like backed myself up. Like I've just killed my store. But the momentum that the shop was starting to gain carried me because I just put all my efforts into other niches.
Yeah.
And I just, I really didn't drop too much. I had less orders the following month, but I didn't drop too much. I was also raising my prices because I was underpriced. So my profit kind of stayed the same that next month, even though my orders were down a bit. And I was getting around 100 and like April was 121 orders and May was 189 orders. And then I dropped in June to 134 orders. And then it just started building back up though. So I had $1,000 profit over the summer. By the end of the summer, I had a month that was like $4,000 profit. And from that day, when I had the $4,000 profit, I haven't dropped under a $3,000 profit since. Most months are better than that. So the longer you're in this and the more you list and the more well-rounded you make your shop, the more money you're able to make each month. You're able to kind of get it to grow each month.
No, I think that's great advice. So it really took you, almost 10 months pretty much to make over $1,000 in a month doing print on demand. And how many hours a day or a week do you think you were putting into it at that time? Because you were still working full-time as a teacher this whole way.
Yes. So I really hit it hard. And if I had listened to more strategies, I could have probably worked a little less hard, but I was just swinging the bat any which way I could. And so it was a lot of work in the beginning. I did not tutor. And instead I, kind of took a chance on not getting the tutoring income. And I would come home and instead of tutoring for 3 or 4 hours every day after school, I came home and I just listed for 3 or 4 hours every day after school. And then on the weekends, I was very motivated to continue that. Sometimes I'd put in 7 or 8 hours, on a Saturday because I just really wanted to get it done. And I even figured out like the first 3 or 4 months, I was sitting there figuring out this. I think I'm putting like 40 hours a weekend. How much am I making per hour? Like 2 pennies an hour. Like, that's
the cool thing about Etsy, right? And building your own business is we're so used to, I give you this much time, I make this much money, right? As a teacher, that's how you get paid. But now that you're 2 years into Etsy and you're getting paid for designs that you made a year ago, a year and a half ago, and you're still making money off that work you did a while ago, it starts to separate, right? Now your time and how much money you make aren't connected. So I know in the beginning, you kind of have to put in this like big amount of work, and then it's like a couple months later, it really pays off. So, just again, to anybody watching, if you're in this boat and you're calculating that you're making 2 cents an hour, just know that it will pay off if you just keep at it and keep learning and keep growing. Well, and I'd be really curious to hear, because I'm sure that everyone watching would want to know any specific strategies that you wish you would have followed in the beginning, now that you mentioned that you could have probably worked a little bit less.
Getting into group shirts for sure. I was not into group shirts. Like I accidentally was in group shirts because I might have one shirt that maybe, that school wanted to buy for all their teachers, but I wasn't marketing it as a group shirt. I didn't have different phrases that people could buy as a group, as a group purchase where everyone's wearing something a little different that plays off of each other's shirts. So getting into group shirts was a game changer. And as a matter of fact, I didn't get into group shirts until around April. It was like toward the end of the school year that year. And like I said, over the summer was when I started to make some real money. And part of that was those group shirt listings taking off also.
Okay, no, that's perfect advice, right? We talk about that a lot on my channel, is getting into group shirts, because that's what really, really helped move the needle for me as well. And like ugly Christmas sweaters, those types of designs did really good for me my first year. So I appreciate you kind of walking us through that, the hard times, right? But now let's talk about the exciting times, right? So in what month was it that you made 4 grand profit the first time? Was that like August or?
Yeah.
And so then from there, how did the rest of your Q4 go last year?
So I had expected to do better and like the following month or two after that, but I didn't. I dropped. It was like a $3,000, like a $3,700 profit month, and then a $3,000 profit month. It's like, oh no, what's going on? But it was just my store wasn't well rounded yet. I was hitting the Halloween and the Christmas stuff. I wasn't hitting Halloween with group stuff. I went back to single shirts for that niche, which I changed, this year. And then it wasn't until Christmas that headed home, after school, thinking about what I was going to be listing, thought, okay, we're a week out from Cyber Monday, Black Friday. It's time to stop listing Christmas stuff. It's, we're only a few weeks out from Christmas. So let me start doing evergreen niches again. What's going to sell in January? What's going to sell in February? And on my way home, I was listening to Life Hackers, and they had said, I implore you, keep listing Christmas stuff. So I went home and I kept listing Christmas stuff. And it was a listing that I did and put up like Cyber Day weekends that weekend that just took off. And, if you're looking into POD and you're thinking about doing POD and you're listening to people talk about POD, that you'll hear people a lot of times say it's just one design. It could really change things. And that design, I was really happy with the money I was making as I was making a lot more than I could have made tutoring by then. I was just hoping to make $1,000 a month, and here I was making $3,000 to $4,000 a month. But that December, I made $11,000 profit that month because I was able to put a group listing out that just took off, and I made several $1,000s just from that one group listing.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, no, I'm sure everyone's so excited to hear that. Like, you really are just one design away from being able to make a bunch of money, but you'll never find it if you don't keep listing, right? And so we've been talking a lot about profit, which I think is a really important thing to know, how much profit you actually get to take home from the sales. But I'd also love it. Do you know what your revenue numbers were for like October, November, December, just to give people a reference?
So October, my revenue was 9,700. In November, it was 20,500. And in December, it was 28,600.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really, really, really great. Those numbers are, really well deserved for you, right? You put in over a year's worth of work before you got to make $11,000 for the first time in a month. And that probably was a game changer. Was that when you really kind of thought like this could replace my income, or when did that cross your mind?
Yeah, that was definitely during that month. I thought, wow, maybe I could make more doing this than I do teaching. And so that was kind of like, and I thought, well, maybe not next school year, which is this school year, maybe the following school year, I could replace my teacher, the money that I make teaching. But it happened, a little faster than I had expected even.
Wow, that's so exciting. So then coming into 2021 now is when you've done really the bulk of the amount of the revenue that you've done, right? Because it starts to compound. Once you start getting it rolling, those listings start selling, you start understanding niches better, understanding what designs sell best. How has 2021 been for you now? Obviously went good because we know you quit your job. But what has this year looked like in contrast to last year?
Well, this year it's been really interesting and fun to watch. I was wondering how I would do in January because, you expect to do not as well in January as you do first during Q4. And I'd heard people talking about it, YouTubers talking about it and all that. And I had also sold a lot of stuff in December and wasn't sure how many people were going to come back and go, I didn't get my shirts in time, or how many refunds I was going to need to do. I only had to do a couple, like maybe 3. So January, I was just thinking, well, if I could break even after all the returns I might have to do, someone that has their shirts didn't get there in time or whatever, I'll be happy. But after all was said and done, I still made around 3,000 profit in January, and it's just grown steadily every month it grows steadily because I keep having my eyes set on what's going to be selling in 2 to 3 months and on keeping up with the evergreen niches that I've been working on. And I'm always trying to add couples and group listings to anything I can think of. So, and it's just steadily grown each month.
Wow, that's amazing. And so when did you decide it was time to quit your job and why?
Over the summer, I thought about it. Going into the summer break, I didn't think that that would be a possibility. But over the summer, just spending, full time working on it over the summer and being able to, list so many things, I just thought, geez, by the end of the summer, I thought, well, I'm making what I would make teaching plus enough to cover what I would have to pay for insurance. And we're going into Q4. And I heard someone say a statement, successful people don't run from risk. They look at it, they assess it, and they figure out what's the worst case scenario if I take this risk. What is the best case scenario? How hard would it be to redirect my life if the worst case scenario happens so I could be right back where I'm at? And I just could not argue with that logic, because the worst case scenario is I go back and I get another teaching job and I could be right back where I was fairly quickly. So I just decided to go ahead and take that risk. And I'm so pleased that I did, because I've been able to work on it full time, which has really helped me to grow it. It's grown a lot since school started. So I made that decision 2 weeks before school started. And so in August, like mid-August, I made that decision, early August.
Wow, that's so amazing. I think getting to quit your job and be your own boss is really scary, right? But if you're making more than you're making at your job, and especially coming into Q4, I made a similar decision last year and quit my job in June, because I was like, well, if I can spend the next few months full time posting for Q4, I know it'll be so much bigger. And I know you're already starting to see that. I don't know if you want to share, but I know before we got on the call, you shared that you had your biggest day ever yesterday here in October, even bigger than your days in December during Christmas last year, right? So that really shows how everything can compound and how everything grows. Do you want to share how much revenue or how many items you sold yesterday?
Well, yesterday I had 52 orders, but it was something like over 100 shirts, because, a lot of group listings. So sometimes people come in and they'll buy 10 shirts. Sometimes I'll get 1 for 1 shirt. So I don't know exactly how many shirts it was yesterday, but it was the most orders I've ever had. And so the revenue was up there. But the other day, I think it was Saturday, a record day also, I think 38 orders. And because before that, last year, my record day was 41 orders. So no, it must have been like 42 orders or 43 orders on Saturday. And it was my record revenue day. I don't remember what the revenue was exactly, but it was like around 4,000 for the revenue.
In one day, guys, one day, she did $4,000 revenue. It took you so long to do $4,000 revenue in just a month. And now just keeping at it, being consistent, learning every day, and, getting to go full time. You did that in one day. That's so impressive.
Cool thing I heard someone say one time was, the difference between someone who is successful and someone who's not at something is the person who's successful was willing to fail a lot more times than the person that isn't successful with it. So I have so many failing listings. I have so many things that I tried that didn't work. And I'm just so glad that I kept plugging through that and just kept failing and failing and failing over and over again, so that I could get those winners. And those winners have come up to what they're adding up to for me now, which is something that's really changed my life for something, in such a great way.
That's amazing. I'm so excited for you. And I think everyone who's watching this is going to be absolutely inspired, because again, I think your story really resonates with a lot of people working full time, doing this as a side hustle, wondering if it's even worth it, right? And a lot of people give up before you succeeded, right? You even had the huge hit of having to take down hundreds of your best-selling listings because it was in a trademarked niche that you actually found out you couldn't sell in, and now you're more safe now. But since you made that change, I think a lot of people are worried that you can only make money on Etsy if you sell trademark stuff, because you see people selling Disney and all these other things. But you're proof now, right? You can make money with those, but you'll get a trademark infringement and lose your shop. So if you switch your focus to making group shirts, being ready in advance for niches, and just learning from everything you do, it might take longer than you want, but 2 years isn't bad to be making more than you ever made as a teacher and getting to work for yourself. So any tips that you have for someone who's sitting there discouraged in those first few months, like you were, only having made a couple sales or no sales, any words of advice?
Yes, just keep listing. Persistence will pay off. You just keep listing, and also surround yourself with a YouTube station like yours. Listen to it every day. Listen to the same videos over and over again. Because if you're finding value in them and you're finding inspiration in them, and you're inspired by someone else's story who was able, a regular person that was able to go from point A to point B, and that point B is where you're trying to get also, you need to hear, like, flood your mind with that, so that you have the gumption and the persistence within your soul to just keep at it, and just to keep at it, keep failing until it's working.
I love that. I think that's really, really good advice. And I think some of the advice you gave, is that from the 4-Hour Work Week? Is that
Yes.
that you read?
You had suggested the book. I thought it was I found a couple of great little nuggets in there. Yeah.
Yeah, some of it doesn't apply. Like, you might fast forward the 4-Hour Work Week a few times when he's talking about lying to your boss and going and living in Bali. But a lot of it really does apply in helping to shift your mindset, right? You can't sit there as, a 4th grade teacher or as whatever you're doing for a living and expect yourself to like have a business mindset or an entrepreneur mindset, because you haven't grown that muscle yet. And so I think it is an important reminder to keep feeding yourself positive things and keep learning and improving every day in your mental as well. Because one of the biggest takeaways from, I think, what you said earlier is that you said, I'm going to do this for a year and I'm going to make it work. And if it doesn't work by a year, maybe I'll give up. But I think a year is a really good amount of time, because even at that year mark, you weren't even making that much money. But by then you were like, ooh, I think I might have something. It wasn't until your second 12 months that you really made like the bulk of your money, right? So now, sitting here, just to kind of finish it off, you've sold $295,000 worth of t-shirts on Etsy, which I'm sure you wouldn't even believed yourself if you heard that 2 years ago. But just for everybody at home to kind of understand what that means, right? You've made most of that in the last 12 months. Would you be comfortable sharing how much profit you actually get to take home out of that 300,000 in sales?
Yeah, it usually winds up being, and it's actually more profit now. I'm gaining more profit now than I was before, because I've been slowly raising my prices to get a little closer to, to the price that I know that other people are getting. And I'm always afraid that's going to drop my sales, but it's been okay, just slowly doing that. And also getting more and more into the group listings, you're making more and more per shirt because you're paying less for shipping per shirt. So I usually make between 28 and like 31% of the total as my profit. So out of that, almost $300,000, probably about 100,000 of that has been profit, and more of that has been, it's really just the last 14 months that I've been making good money.
Right.
And really this year, aside from last November and December, really like the last 3 or 4 months of, consistent, just really gaining in that, making more and more orders and more sales, leading to more and more profit. So that gives you an idea of just the longer you stay in it, the more you're going to make, because your work starts double downing on itself.
Right. Like you were saying earlier, I think you had mentioned before the call that some of your best sellers for Christmas last year are already selling really well this year. And that's the exciting thing, that's going to just keep happening. Like, just imagine 5 years from now, you're not going to have to work nearly as hard because of all the hard work you put in the beginning. And I think that's so inspiring and so exciting. And that'll give you more time to focus on other things, which I know one of your goals coming up here soon is to start your own YouTube channel. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what your YouTube channel's name is going to be? That way, anyone who wants to follow your journey when you're ready to share it can go ahead and subscribe and follow along as you keep growing your business.
All right. So my YouTube channel will be about my story and strategies and things that I've, have learned along the way. I've been very inspired by Cassie and this, her. I'm kind of a few months behind Cassie in this journey of Etsy. And then I've been very inspired by her next journey in YouTube. So it'll be Shawna Lynn, SHAWNALYNN. And I'll just be sharing my story and how I'm doing and getting, the next phase, what strategies I'm using. I might be opening up another shop with a different type of product. So just some exciting things that I'm thinking about and excited to explore and share what I learned along the way.
That's awesome. So excited. So I'll go ahead and link down below the link to Shawna's YouTube channel, even though she's not posting anything yet, but that way you can be the first to know when she's ready to share all those exciting details. So thank you so much for being here, Shawna. Again, I think everyone's really going to love your story and be so inspired, especially if they're sitting there and not making sales now. So I appreciate you being here with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I just want to say thank you one more time to Shawna for coming onto this channel and talking through all of the hard times she went through growing her print-on-demand business and Etsy. I know that a lot of you have been through really similar struggles. So again, I really hope that you take from this that if you just keep listing, keep learning, and just persevere, you really can make a full-time income and absolutely change your life with print-on-demand. So I hope you really enjoyed this, and please go ahead and like this video and subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this in the future, and we'll see you in the next one.